grid template columns because on the actual job page, I want to have a split columns where one is 70 and one is 30. So we'll have a class, let's do 70/30, and then we're going to set that to a value of 70% and not quite 30, but 28%. Okay, so it's just adding some extra classes for Tailwind, or an extra class. And that's it. So we can close that, or we can save that. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else. The variance extend we don't need, but I guess we could put it in there like that. And yeah, so we can close that up. Now we can continue on here, and let's see, it'll also create a post CSS. Yep, that's already created. We don't need to do anything to that. That's the post CSS. And let's see what else. We already did this, the purge, which is now content. And then the last thing we have to do is just add these 3 lines to our CSS file. So that's going to be in assets and then main.css. I'm going to replace everything here, add that. And now if we look at our project, let's see, is this being included? Should be, because you know what, I might have to restart the server. There we go. All right, so Tailwind classes should now work. We can test that out by doing class, let's set that to text-2xl, and there we go. So Tailwind is now working. Now I like to have my projects at least look decent, so in the final repository, which is a link to in the description, you're going to see a repo that has the final code, and it's going to have this _theme files, and this is just the HTML for the project. Like if I open the index.html, you can see basically just the interface, or just the website. It's not functional or anything, and there's no data, real data. It's just the HTML. All right, so what I would suggest doing is bringing that into your you can bring it into your project or open it up in a separate editor. So I'm just going to copy the folder into here so that I have access to those, so for when we need the HTML. And then also, if you look in source, there's going to be in assets, there's an IMG folder, so I want to bring that over to our assets folder like that. And I think all that's in there is the logo. Let's see. Yeah, it's just a logo. And we can get rid of the base CSS and this logo SVG. We can delete both of those. Okay, so now we have the logo. Now the first thing I want to do, and you know what, I'm just going to open up the theme just so we can see what the page we're looking on looks like and what we're actually working on at that time, which first I want to do the nav bar here. So the nav bar is going to have the logo and then just some links. And I want it to have active links. Like if I click on jobs, I want the jobs to be highlighted in the nav bar. So we're going to create a component in the components folder here called navbar.view. Okay, all your Vue components are going to have a .view extension. And when we add our script tag, since we're using the composition API and we're using the shorthand, then you always want to make sure you add setup here. If you don't add setup, then you're going to have to export default, you know, if you're using either the options API or if you're using the explicit setup function. So here I'm going to import, and we want to bring the logo in. So that's going to be from, and we can use @ so this is a shorthand or an alias for the source folder. So from there we want to go into assets / and then img and then logo.png. I believe it's a PNG. Yeah. All right, so we're going to bring that in, and then let's create our template. And I forgot Emmett's not working for template. And to get the HTML, I'm going to go into index.html, or any of them really, and grab the nav tag. So that whole thing, because there's no sense in us typing out all that. And then paste that in the template here, and then we just want to replace the image or the image source, because right now it's just pointing to images/logo, but what we want to do is bind the logo variable that we just created above to this source. So we can do v-bind. See, so now you already know what this stuff is, and I don't have to explain it because we already went over it. And we want to bind it to that logo variable. So in here we can just put logo, and then we can even use the shorthand and just do :source. All right, so let's go ahead and save that, and let's go to our version. Now obviously it's not going to show because we need to bring this nav bar into the app.vue. So up at the top here, let's say script, let's add in setup, and then let's import the nav bar. Okay, that's going to be from our alias / and then components / and then nav bar. And then we can replace this h1 here with the nav bar embed, and there we go. Okay, so I mean these right now are going to like .html. Obviously those don't go to the right place, and we don't even have the Vue router set up, so don't worry about the actual links for now. We'll get to that later, and we'll get to the highlighting each of these links later. So the next thing I'll do is the hero component, which is going to be this right here. It just has a title and a subtitle, and this is where we're going to get into props, right? Because components can have data passed in, and those are called props. So what we'll do is in components, let's create a new file called hero.vue, and we'll create script setup, and let's add our template. Okay, and then for the template, I'm just going to go to the index.html, and we're going to get the next section. So I created this template so it's just easy to go in and grab each section. I know some people really don't like that, to have to copy and paste, but we also don't want to type out a bunch of classes. That's not what this is about. So let's paste that in the template, and we'll just save it for now. I'll do the props after. Let's just bring it into our app. So we'll just copy this down, and let's take navbar here and replace that with hero. And then let's see, under that, we'll say hero. And there we go. Now, like I said, we're going to get into props. So I want to be able to pass into hero. I want to be able to do this title equals, and then set it to, we'll just say test title for now. Okay, so I want to be able to pass this in and have that show here as the h1. So to have props in a component, we have to go into the script, and we have to first off import define props. Okay, so we're going to import that from Vue. Then we want to call define props, and then we can pass in here an object of the props that we want. And there's a couple ways to do this. We can say title, because that's what I want to call this prop, and then we can just set that to string like that, or you can set it to an object and then have type and then put string. Okay, now the reason I want to do this is because I also want to have a default prop. So if I put here default, and I'm going to set that to become a Vue dev as the default. So basically, if I don't pass anything in, if I don't pass a title in, then this is what's going to show. Now we can just simply go down to the h1 and replace this with our double curly braces and title. And if I save, now we get test title. Okay, now I want to be able to pass in the subtitle as well. So let's say subtitle and set that to test subtitle. And then what we would do is just add that. So I guess we can just copy that down and do subtitle. It's going to be a string, and then for the default, let's set that to this text right here. And then in the paragraph, get rid of that and have subtitle, and there we go. Now, if I don't pass either of these in, which I'm not because I just want to use the default, then there we go. We have the default values. So that's essentially how you use props. You just bring in define props, you define them with their type and a default if you want one, and then just use them. So pretty simple. So the next thing I want to do is these two cards here, which I'm going to put them both in a component called home cards, and then I'm going to show you how we can use a container component, which is a component that wraps around content. So let's start off by creating in components home cards dot view, and we'll add script, add our setup, and then our template. And notice I'm not doing any style because we're using Tailwind classes, so there's really we don't need any custom styling. So to get the home cards HTML, I'm going to go to theme files and then the index, and this developers and employers, that section is what I want to copy. So I'm going to grab that, paste that into the template, and for now just save it, bring it into our app.view. So we'll copy that down, and let's replace that and that with home cards, and then we're going to put that down here, home cards, save it. Let's look at our version, and there we go. Now I want to, like I said, have a wrapper component called card, and put the data, or not the data, but the content of each one of these inside of it. So basically this right here would be, instead of having a div here, we could have card like that, and then anything that's in here would be in that card, and we can have certain background color props and stuff like that in the card. So let's create a new component called card, and put the data, or not the data, but the content of each one of these inside of it. So basically this right here would be, instead of having a div here, we could have card like that, and then anything that's in here would be in that card, and we can have certain background color props and stuff like that in the card. So let's create a new component called card.view, and we'll have script, setup, and template. And let's see, the way that I want to do this is where we have our home cards, we have this div with the class of BG Gray, P6. Basically I want to have this div, so I'm going to just copy that and paste that in here with an ending div. And ultimately I want to be able to pass the background color in so we can have a dynamic background color for the cards, but I'll just leave the gray for now. And the way that we output the content that we wrap is with a slot like this. And if you've used React, it's similar to when you have a children prop, right? And you output that. So now, yeah, we can save that. And now in home cards, I'm going to bring in the card component, I don't know why it's not coming up. So slash component slash card.view. And then, so now, yeah, we can save that. And now in home cards, I'm going to bring in app is with a slot in, so we can have a dynamic background color for the cards, but I'll just leave the gray for now. And the way that we output the content that we wrap is with a slot like this. We output the content that we wrap is the background color in, so we can have a dynamic background color for the cards, but I'll just leave the gray for now. And the way that we output the content that we wrap is with a slot like this. And if you've used React, it's similar to when you have a children prop, right? And you output that. So now, yeah, we can save that. And now in home cards, I'm going to bring in the card component. I don't know why it's not coming up. So slash component slash card.view. And then I'm going to replace the div right here where we have the P6 rounded shadow. I'm going to replace that div with the card component, and we're going to wrap that content. Okay, so that's the first card. Then we have this one, which has the BG green. So we're going to replace that div with card as well. So if I save that, now it's working, but notice the BG green is now gone, right? Because the card component has BG gray. So what I'd like to do is have a prop for that class, for the background. So let's go up into the script of card and let's import, we're going to import define props, and then let's define props. And I'm going to call this BG for background, and let's say type is going to be string, and then let's add a default, and the default will be bg-gray-100. And now we can come down here and we can use this BG prop in place of this, but we need this to be dynamic, right? Because we're going to be adding a variable to it. So what we can do is bind to this by putting a colon here, or you could do vbind colon, and then instead of double quotes, well, actually, no, we still want double quotes, but we want to add in backticks after it. Okay, because when you put a colon here, whatever you're putting within the double quotes is JavaScript. Okay, it's actual code. Prop, a type, the script working, but notice the BG green is now gone, right? Because the card component has BG gray. So what I'd like to do is have a prop for that class, for the background. So let's go up into the script of card and let's import, we're going to import define props, and then let's define props, and I'm going to call this BG for background, and let's say type is going to be string, and then let's add a default, and the default will be bg-gray-100. And now we can come down here and we can use this BG prop in place of this, but we need this to be dynamic, right? Because we're going to be adding a variable to it. So what we can do is bind to this by putting a colon here, or you could do vbind colon, and then instead of double quotes, well, actually, no, we still want double quotes, but we want to add in backticks after it. Okay, because when you put a colon here, whatever you're putting within the double quotes is JavaScript. Okay, it's actual code. So right here, so we want the backticks, and then we want to replace that with BG, like that. So now, if I save, they're still both gray, but I should now be able to go to the second card and pass in BG. You'll see it comes up here, and let's say BG-green-100, save it, and now that's green. If I passed in red 100, so now I have this dynamic component where I can just pass in the color that I want this card, and I can reuse that all around the project. All right, so that takes care of that. Now, the next part is going to be here, the browse jobs. So what we're going to do is create, let's just close some of this stuff up. Just leave the app open. And we're going to create a new component called job listings, plural, .view. And let's add a script tag with our setup. And then we'll have our template. And just for now, I'm just going to say jobs listings or job listings. Okay, and then we're going to bring that into our app.view. So import jobs, our job listings, and let's output that right here. So job listings, and then if we look at our project, you should just see job listings. Now, as far as the data goes, ultimately we're gonna use JSON server, which is like a fake backend REST API, but for now we're just gonna use a JSON file. So if you go to the code in the repository, and let me just grab that real. real quick, like a fake backend REST API. So import job listings plural dot view, and let's add a script tag with our setup, and then we'll have our template, and just for now I'm just going to say jobs listings or job listings. Okay, and then we're going to bring that into our app.view. So import jobs, our job listings, and let's output that right here. So job listings, and then if we look at our project, you should just see job listings. Now, as far as the data goes, ultimately we're gonna use JSON server, which is like a fake backend REST API, but for now we're just gonna use a JSON file. So if you go to the code in the repository, and let me just grab that real quick. So code dev. Okay, so this is the code from the repo, and you'll see that in the source folder there's a jobs.json and jobs2.json. So right now we're going to be working with the jobs2.json. There's just a slight difference here, but we do have to change the structure later, so that's why there's two versions. So let's bring that into the source folder. Okay, make sure you bring it into source, not the root. And then we're just going to rename that for now to just jobs.json. And what we have is an array of objects that have an ID, a title, a type, description, location, salary, and then a company object with a name, description, email, and phone. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now in that job listings component, I'm going to import that data. So let's say import, and I'm going to call this job data, and that's going to be from, and then up one level. Actually, we can just do @ and should be, yeah, that should work, right? Did we put it? Did I put it in the right place? Yeah, source. All right, so that should work. Now, in order to make that data reactive, which we need to do because we're going to be adding and deleting and stuff, so we also want to import ref from Vue. Okay, and then what we can do is just create a variable called jobs and set that to ref, and then pass in job data, making it reactive. So again, if you're coming from the React framework, it's similar to useState. And just to see if that's actually getting them, let's do a console log, and it's going to be jobs.value, because remember, since we're using ref, we use .value. And if I open up the console here, you can see that it is fetching that data. So array, and there we go. All right, so now that we've done that, I'm going to use v4 to loop over them and then output each one like this. All right, so let's go into the template here. And yeah, I guess for now, I'm just going to have a div. And let's say v-4. And we're going to set that to, let's say, job in jobs. And we need to give it a key, so colon key, and we'll set that to, let's say, job.id. And then in here, all I'm going to output for now, just to make sure this is working, is the job.title. And there we go. So we know that we're fetching the data. I mean, fetching, if you even want to call it that, we're just getting it from a file. Now we want to have like the title and stuff in here, and it's going to be kind of confusing if I copy it. So let's just type this part out. So I'm just going to put section and class, and then also m dash margin dash auto. And in that div, we're going to have an h2, and that's going to have a class of text dash 3xl, and then let's do font dash bold and text dash green, or text green 500, margin bottom 6, and text dash center. All right, and that's going to just say browse jobs. Okay, now let's see, we want to go under the H2, and that's where we're going to have our grid. So let's say grid, and then grid dash calls dash 1 and gap dash 6. So that'll be a 1 column, but on medium screens and up, so MD colon, and this is just Tailwind. If you don't understand these classes, that's fine, don't worry about it. That's not really the point of this course. So MD grid calls 3. All right, so in here is where we want to have this div that iterates over the job. So I'm going to cut that from here and put that inside the grid like that. All right, so now it's going to look like this. And if I make this bigger, you'll see that it goes into 3 columns. But obviously that's not the data we want to display, just the title. We want the whole card, this whole box. All right, so what we can do is go into the template, the index.html, and down in the browse jobs, we already have this stuff, right? So what we can do is just grab one of these listings, and they're labeled, they're commented. So I'm going to grab this first job listing, which ends right here. So I'm going to copy that, and then we're going to create another component for just a single job listing. So job listing singular dot view, and we'll add script setup. and then our template, and then I'm going to paste that into the template. Now I'm going to want to show this job listing component for every listing here, right, instead of this div. So let's bring